정말 이질적인 하나의 모습이 눈에 들어오더라고요. 우리 인간들이 버린 쓰레기들. 제가 좋아하는 산을 즐기기만 하는 게 아니라 계속 즐기려면 제가 지켜야 하는 부분이 있으니까 나라도 조금 무언가를 해보자. 그리고 마음이 맞는 사람들이랑 같이 한 번에 변화시킬 수는 없을지라도 뭔가 우리가 계속 할 수 있는 일들을 해보자라고 했던 게 클린 하이킹이었던 것 같아요. 결국에는 사람들이 쉽게 사용했다가 내가 즐기고 맛보고 그냥 쉽게 편하게 사용하고 버려지는 것들이 가장 불편하기도 하고 우리가 심각하다고 생각하는 부분인 것 같아요. 쓰레기들을 보면 화가 나기도 하지만 또 이게 혼자 줍는 게 아니라 같이 줍다 보면 되게 재밌는 부분이 정말 오래된 막 50년도 더 된 쓰레기들을 발굴을 할 때가 있거든요. 2001년! 2001년! 우리가 태어난 연도보다 더 오래된 것들도 있고 이러다 보니까 같이 줍다 보면 더 그런 특이한 쓰레기, 재밌는 쓰레기를 찾으려고 게임처럼 막 하게 돼요. 자주 산을 찾고 자연을 찾고 즐기는 것도 중요하지만 조금 더 산을 사랑할 수 있는 쉬운 실천법들이 있거든요. 자연 속에서 자신도 즐기고 또 자연을 지킬 수 있는 활동을 좀 더 놀이로서 재밌고 즐겁고 유쾌하게 이런 환경이란 게 너무 딱딱하고 내가 뭔가 힘을 들여서 해야 되는 일이 아니라 우리가 즐기면서 함께 할 수 있는 놀이처럼 그렇게 느낄 수 있는 자리를 많이 마련하는 그런 클린 하이커가 되고 싶습니다. 나는 쓰레기로 노는 클린하이커!
The South Korean government says it'll inject an additional $14.7 billion into boosting private consumption and regenerating the local economy using a supplementary budget. In the Middle East, Israel hit a key Iranian nuclear site, and Iran hammered the main hospital in southern Israel on Thursday, while the United States' possible involvement in the conflict remains up in the air. The U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday left its key interest rate unchanged for the fourth time in a row, hinting at least 2 rate cuts within the year. South Korea has drawn up its first extra budget under the brand new government, with the ultimate goal of stimulating economic recovery. And the budget also includes cash handouts to all citizens. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
The second round of a supplementary budget bill this year, the first of its kind under Lee Jae-myung's presidency, has been drafted and is set to go to the National Assembly next week. President Lee, presiding over a cabinet meeting on Thursday, took a final look.
작년 12월 3일 이후로 심리적 위축이 심해서 있던 손님도 얼마 안 되던 손님도 다 떨어져 나갔다고 현장에서 너무 어려워합니다. 다행히 최근에는 조금 분위기가 개선되고 있긴 한데 어쨌든 본질적으로 우리 서민들이 겪는 고통이 매우 큰 것 같아요. 국가 재정을 이제 사용할 때가 됐습니다.
The size of this supplementary budget is 30.5 trillion Korean won, or a bit more than 22 billion US dollars. 15.2 trillion of that will be going into boosting the economy through stimulus. 5 trillion will be going to stabilizing people's livelihoods. 10.3 will be for revenue adjustment for the nation's fiscal situation. This means 20.2 trillion will be for direct spending by the government, with 19.8 trillion being debt. Going into the details, 15.2 trillion for economic stimulus will consist of 10.3 trillion of that being relief to everyone in a different form of the recipient's choosing. 1 trillion will go into boosting discounts and other needed aspects. 2.7 will go into support for the construction sector, as it's currently one of the hardest hit industries with close links to the employment of working-class citizens. President Lee has been pushing for cash relief to everyone for some time now since his lawmaker days. But then conservative government have been saying a universal payout is not right due to the financial pressure on the nation's fiscal status, and selective support is better.
만약 이제 일반 원칙으로요. 만약에 우리가 어떤 제도를 시행하는 데 필요한 경비다 이게라고 하면 그 경비 지출에 따라서 혜택을 보는 반사적 이익을 보는 사람은 누구여야 하느냐? 그건 가난한 사람이어야 하느냐? 아니면 세금을 많이 내는 부자여야 하느냐? 저는 어떤 필요에 의해서 경비를 지출한다고 하면 그 반사적 혜택은 최소한 국민들이 공평하게 혜택을 누리는 게 맞다고 생각해요.
The draft did go with a universal payout, but for those who need it, the more they will receive. The top 10%, approximately 5.12 million people, will receive a one-time payment of 150,000 Korean won, or around $100 US. And the biggest group of citizens of around 43 million people will receive the first payment of 150,000 Korean won, but will get an additional 100,000 in the second round. The lower levels will receive more in first-time payments, with the social welfare recipients later getting 500,000 in total. As for stabilizing livelihoods, money will be spent on debt relief for small businesses, as well as boosting employment and taming inflation. Now the ball is in the National Assembly's court, with the government's draft being transferred on the 23rd. Lawmakers will be reviewing the bill, but with the ruling Democratic Party holding the majority on the floor, the bill won't face many obstacles. 김도현, Arirang News.
And now we have our Kim Do-yeon in the studio to give us more details on this supplementary budget bill. Good evening, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So, Do-yeon, the spending vouchers for Korean nationals has been a hot topic for the entire nation, as it affects every Korean national, including us, both of us.
Right.
Tell us more.
Right, Tommy. It's something, as I've said in the report, that President Lee has been pushing for since his opposition leader days. And as we heard, he believes strongly in the government spending more during these hard times, with benefits going to everyone. Also, this is to boost spending. One thing to clarify is that it's not in the form of cash, it's spending vouchers. So there are 3 ways to receive them: local district vouchers, a prepaid check card, or directly to your credit or check card. Now, it will be to boost domestic spending, so it's not for those who are going to travel abroad. Also, while the specifics aren't out yet, they are going to have an expiration date. So far, the government has said 4 months, but that detail will be decided at the National Assembly. On top of this, there will be other discounts to make sure people spend more here in Korea.
We aim to achieve both goals, providing swift support through phased payments and tailoring assistance based on income levels. An additional 600 billion won will also be allocated for local gift certificates, bringing the total issuance to a record high 29 trillion won. The discount rate when purchasing these certificates will also be raised from a maximum of 10% to 15%.
Doyon, let's focus on the government's financial status. Now, I do have to say some people may be worried about the additional debt. What does the government have to say about that?
Right, the government did admit that the debt had risen and the fiscal balance rose. But take a listen to the second Vice Minister for Economy and Finance again.
However, looking at past cases and international comparisons, we don't see the current level as posing a serious risk just yet. Efforts to ensure fiscal sustainability will continue in parallel.
The government says it tried to be careful with the financing for this supplementary budget. It secured 5.3 trillion won by reshuffling spending priorities and another 5.5 by tapping into available funds and adjusting how much will be issued in foreign exchange bonds. That allowed them to keep additional bond issuance to 19.8 trillion won, minimizing the burden on taxpayers. Still, despite those efforts, the fiscal deficit widened from 3.3% to 4.2% of GDP, and the national debt ratio also inched up. But the finance ministry says that what's more important right now is responding to urgent economic needs.
Indeed, Doyon, thank you for coming in and for that thorough wrap-up.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in other news, the cabinet on Thursday passed an enforcement decree to implement the revised Special Act in support of scientists and engineers for strengthening national science and technology competitiveness. Senior Presidential Secretary for AI and Future Planning, Ha Jung-woo, said the decree will lay out the groundwork for more support across the science and engineering fields, starting with outreach programs to spark interest among younger students. It also promotes quality education and research at the university level, including reforms to research systems and training aligned with industry needs. Now, national guidelines for postdoctoral researchers will be standardized to improve hiring, career development, and research conditions. The decree takes effect this Saturday. And President Lee Jae-myung is set to meet with the leader of the ruling party as well as the leader of the main opposition party this Sunday. Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho told reporters on Thursday that the president will host a luncheon at the presidential residence with the Democratic Party acting leader and floor leader Kim Byung-gi, People Power Party interim leader Kim Yong-tae, and the party's floor leader Song Wan-seok. The president will share his experience from the recent G7 summit in Canada and engage in what the top office described as a frank and open dialogue with no set items on the agenda. Israel and Iran have continued to go back and forth with airstrikes for an entire week now. And U.S. President Donald Trump is delaying a decision on his country's military involvement. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
7 days into Israel's military campaign against Iranian nuclear and missile facilities, cross-border attacks are escalating. On Thursday morning local time, an Iranian missile struck Israel's main southern hospital, causing what officials described as extensive damage. This came as Israel targeted a heavy water reactor southwest of the Iranian capital, with Iranian state media reporting that the facility had been evacuated ahead of the strike and that no civilian areas were affected. Israel had issued a warning earlier in the day, stating its intention to strike the site and urging residents to evacuate. The latest air assaults come amid uncertainty over possible U.S. involvement in the conflict. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday local time, U.S. President Donald Trump said that he had yet to make a final call and he would hold off doing so for now.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Shortly afterwards, he convened a second White House Situation Room meeting in as many days to discuss the agenda with his national security advisors. The talks lasted for around an hour, and it is not yet clear what was discussed or whether any decisions were made. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he had approved plans for a potential military strike on Iran, but decided to pause, hoping Tehran might still give up its nuclear program. Earlier in the day, Trump claimed that Iran had proposed to come to the White House to begin negotiations and once again called for unconditional surrender. In response, Iran's diplomatic mission to the United Nations in New York hit back on social media by saying that no Iranian official has asked to grovel at the gates of the White House, followed by a message from Iran's supreme leader himself.
The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war, as it has stood so far, and stands firm against the imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not surrender to anyone in the face of imposition.
As tensions intensify, nations are moving to evacuate their own nationals from Israel. The U.S. State Department has started pulling out non-essential diplomats and is arranging evacuation flights and ships for American citizens, while China is also working to evacuate its citizens. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And a group of South Korean nationals in Iran has been safely evacuated to Turkmenistan amid intensifying military clashes between Israel and Iran. As Seoul's Foreign Ministry said Thursday, some 20 individuals, including 18 South Korean nationals and 2 Iranian family members, departed from Tehran and traveled around 1,200 kilometers for some 30 hours to reach Iran's eastern border checkpoint. The ministry provided charter buses and assisted with the border procedures, as well as other necessary consular support. Seoul also sent a rapid response team to Turkmenistan to help with accommodation and assistance in arranging return flights. Following this evacuation, around 90 Koreans remain in Iran. The government stated that it stands ready to provide additional consular support and evacuation assistance upon request. Its travel advisories for Iran and Israel are both at level 3, which recommends Korean nationals leave. Seoul has called on Moscow to play a constructive role in promoting peace on the Korean peninsula and immediately end illegal military cooperation with North Korea. Upon the one-year mark of Russia and North Korea's mutual security pact, a South Korean government official expressed a grave concern over continued violations of UN Security Council resolutions, saying any agreements between the two sides must fully comply with international law. South Korea intends to continue efforts to achieve progress toward peace on the peninsula and resolving North Korea's nuclear threat. The official added Seoul urges Pyongyang to respond positively to these efforts and calls on Russia to assume a constructive role in promoting peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The U.S. Federal Reserve officials held on to their key interest rates yet again on Wednesday, but they still foresee 2 rate cuts by the end of the year. Moon Ji-young tells us more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve kept its key rate unchanged for the 4th straight meeting Wednesday and lowered the country's economic growth outlook. This keeps the rate in the 4.25 to 4.5% range and marks the 4th consecutive rate freeze since Trump took office, despite pressure to make cuts.
What we're waiting for to reduce rates is to understand what will happen with really the tariff inflation. And there's a lot of uncertainty about that.
So far, inflation has remained relatively tame near the Fed's target of 2%. However, economists warn it may take months for the effects of tariffs to be felt. Inflation has also seen recent upward pressure from rising oil prices driven by the conflict between Israel and Iran. However, Fed officials still foresee 2 interest rate cuts by the end of this year, the same as they projected in March. The central bank's latest quarterly projections show noticeably weaker growth, higher inflation, and slightly higher unemployment by the end of this year than it had forecast in March. For this year, Fed officials expect inflation to rise to 3%, unemployment to increase to 4.5%, and growth to slow to 1.4%. The Fed also projects GDP to grow by 1.4% in 2025, down from 1.7% projected in March.
Following growth of 2.5% last year, GDP was reported to have edged down in the first quarter, reflecting swings in net exports that were driven by businesses bringing in imports ahead of potential tariffs.
President Donald Trump has publicly criticized Powell for not cutting rates, increasing pressure on the central bank. But the Fed chairman dismissed criticism, saying, quote, "We are in a good place." Meanwhile, this week's decision puts the benchmark rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. at up to 2 percentage points, with the Bank of Korea slashing its key rate to 2.5% at its last meeting in May. On the same day, Bank of Korea Deputy Governor Park Jong-woo noted the Fed chairman's cautious policy approach, influenced by U.S. tariff policy and divergent views among officials. Speaking at a meeting on macroeconomic issues, he also highlighted the growing uncertainty regarding the future path of U.S. monetary policy. 문지영, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the State Department says it's restarting student visa applications for foreigners, but under the condition that all applicants make their social media accounts public for review. Iuni reports.
The U.S. State Department is resuming the process for foreign nationals applying for student visas following a temporary suspension last month. But according to a statement released Wednesday, applicants will now be required to provide information about their social media profiles. All applicants will be asked to set the privacy settings on all their social media profiles to public. New guidance directs U.S. diplomats to look for any indications of hostility toward the citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles of the United States. Failure to comply may be seen as an attempt to evade screening or as an effort to conceal online activity. This policy applies to students and other applicants for visas in the F, M, and J categories, which refer to academic and vocational education as well as cultural exchanges. The temporary pause in visa interview scheduling last month was prompted by the U.S. evaluating new social media vetting procedures, leaving students worldwide anxious. The New York Times commented that the guidelines' vague parameters will no doubt create much uncertainty among American universities and students and scholars overseas who intend to travel to the United States. It also wrote that critics say such a process and other related actions by Secretary of State Marco Rubio are aimed at limiting free speech, enforcing certain beliefs, and pressuring foreign citizens to censor themselves and refrain from criticizing the Trump administration. Meanwhile, according to a senior State Department official, the Trump administration is working to make America safer, acting on citizen expectations, and that Marco Rubio was helping to make America and its universities safer while bringing the State Department into the 21st century. Iunhee, Arirang News.
And now, back on the local front, young overseas Koreans are taking part in a special program here aimed at offering them the opportunity to delve into their roots. An Sung-jin has the story.
7.5 million. That's how many overseas Koreans there are. Gathered here are around 240 next-generation overseas Koreans aged 15 to 18. This teen camp, hosted by the Overseas Korean Agency and organized by the Overseas Koreans Cooperation Center, has participants from 26 countries.
For these students, by visiting their parents' country, they can really feel their Korean heritage. Our ultimate goal is to increase the budget for such programs so we can invite more participants.
Especially as 2025 is the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation, these students are delving into learning about their history and roots.
Programs like these offer the opportunity for overseas Koreans to experience Koreans' history, culture, and society while helping them build connection with younger people in the country.
For some, the 7-day program starts with a visit to Seodaemun Prison History Hall, which gives them a chance to understand Japan's colonial era and reflect on their background. For 15-year-old Sophia, this was an opportunity to fulfill her interests and ties with her Korean roots.
My grandmother was born in Korea, but it so happened that they were deported in train cars to Kazakhstan. Just in the cold, they were thrown like that. They started working at coal mines, and life began to improve for them. It's my first time in Korea, but I really like it here, and I will definitely come again in the future and maybe study here.
And at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History, students look back at the country's past to strengthen ties and raise awareness of their Korean identity.
I know one of my great-grandfathers on my grandmother's side was a war veteran after the knock-on for the Korean military. I feel like it shows a lot of courage and that courage is often seen throughout my family, I believe. That's one of the main reasons why I've come to Korea.
This program for the summer will run until August, not only for teens, but also for those aged up to 24 as well, to foster overseas Koreans as global leaders who embrace and uphold their Korean heritage. 안성진, Arirang News.
The heat is at its peak today. The daytime temperature in Seoul rose up to 33 degrees. Wonju, Cheongju, and Gyeongju 34 degrees, which is even higher than at the same time yesterday. Rain will spread to the Seoul metropolitan area, Chungcheongbuk-do province, and Jeollanam-do province tonight and spread to all over the country tomorrow. Heavy rain of up to 150 millimeters is expected in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, Gangwon-do province, Chungcheongnam-do province, and Jeollabuk-do province, and 120 millimeters or more in other Seoul metropolitan area. Tomorrow morning will start warm at around 22 to 23 degrees all over the country. Daily highs will move up to 25 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Busan, 28 degrees in Jeju. Rain in the central parts of the country will gradually stop on Saturday, but this rainy season will continue in the south for the time being. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami, and for all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
과거와 현재, 미래가 어우르는 경주에서 신라의 정신과 에이펙 2025를 만납니다.
Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. Welcome to the globalists. We're in a new set, a brand new set.
I am a globalist, and I'm the globalist.
And I'm the globalist who wants to bring Chang right into your kitchen.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. Artificial intelligence is transforming every layer of society, from classrooms and clinics to economies and elections. But while technology races forward, global human development seems to be stalling. The latest UNDP Human Development Report, released today, titled A Matter of Choice, warns of widening inequality, eroding agency, and deepening distrust unless we act deliberately. As digital divides harden and AI systems reflect the biases of their creators, the stakes are growing globally. At this turning point, how can we ensure AI serves people, not the other way around? And what roles should nations such as Korea play in bridging capability gaps and advancing a more inclusive, ethical, and human-centered development model? To explore these critical questions, we speak with Pedro Conceição, Director of the Human Development Report Office at the UNDP, here in the studio with us. A big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Director, let's begin with the big picture first. So, the 2025 HDR opens with a stark warning that AI is accelerating while human development stagnates. Director, what structural changes are essential to bridge the gap between technology and human progress at this point?
Well, let's go back to the state of human development.
Human development is this idea that people should be able to live lives to their full potential. And what we found in the report that we launched earlier today was that, as you said, globally, if we look globally, progress on human development is very slow. In fact, it's the slowest it has been in 35 years. At the same time, we see that the gap between the countries at the top and at the bottom of human development is widening. Now, for the fourth year in a row, after many decades in which it was contracting. So this is on the one side, we see this slowdown in progress in human development and widening in inequalities. In the context of the report, we also ask people what they expect about AI. So not a prediction about what AI will happen, but what do people expect? And we found that in lower HDI countries, 2/3 of the respondents to our survey expect AI to be important in their lives, in the world of work, health, and education. So we need to bridge this gap between slowdown in human development and the expectation that people have that AI is going to be an important part of their lives.
That's going to be a big challenge moving forward. Now, building on this contrast, Director, the report also stresses that development is a matter of choice. So how can national governments and international actors align their policies to prioritize people over platforms?
Well, I think the first important point is to look at AI or look at technology more broadly as something that in itself does not determine social, economic, or political outcomes. Often people think that we are destined to have AI, for instance, replace people just because AI performs as well or in cases better than humans at some tasks. And the importance of emphasizing choices is to make the point that actually it's not about what the technology does, the performance that it has, but rather the way in which it is incorporated in the economy, in our society, in our politics, and the kind of choices that individuals, that firms and governments make that will ultimately determine what happens with AI.
So by choice, we mean the way it's been encompassed in our daily lives.
Exactly.
So, Director, let's also touch upon another key framework that's been introduced in the report. It's the idea of complementary economy. So for starters, it could be a new term. Could you explain for us what it means and how AI might be used to amplify human creativity and purpose?
Well, it goes back to this notion of choices, right? So choices, but what kind of choices should we be making? So in a human development report, we are concerned with advancing human development, expanding human development. And one of the things that we emphasize is that in the world of work, AI should not be used to replace people, but actually to work with people, together with people, to complement what people do. So the complementary economy comes from this notion that AI should complement what people can do and actually enable them to do more, to augment what people can do. Another way in which AI can be helpful is in helping people to be more creative, be it in artistic expression or in scientific discovery, if we use, again, AI as a companion, as something that complements what humans can do, as opposed to something that competes with humans. So the idea of complementarity, complementary economy, is about finding ways to make sure that AI works with people as opposed to AI competing with people.
That seems to be a very difficult task. You know, it's a very competitive society, of course, and people are kind of worried about being replaced by AI. So, are there any efforts being made on that front?
Well, exactly, because say people are worried about being replaced by AI because they see that AI can, for example, answer a medical exam very well, all the questions in a medical exam. Does that mean that AI is going to replace a doctor? There are several reasons why that is not likely to happen. One is that what a doctor does goes beyond just the clinical knowledge that the doctor has. There are many other things that a doctor needs to do. Also, patients may not appreciate interacting with a machine as opposed to interacting with a person or a human being. What AI can do, though, is help the doctor do its job in a better way. That's again this idea of complementarity, this idea of augmentation that we emphasize in the report. So again, it goes back to the fact that it's a matter of choice. It's not determined by the technology, it's determined by the way in which we deploy the technology.
So humans decide and AI just helps along,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Now, at the heart of human development seems to be is agency. A recurring insight in the report is that digital technologies can both empower and also control. How do you protect human agency in this increasingly algorithmic world, especially for these vulnerable groups?
Well, it goes back to choices and the kind of incentives, regulation we put in place. So again, to stay with the example of the world of work, AI can be used to, in some sense, to surveillance of work tasks. So that would be something that curtails agency. But it can also be used, as I mentioned earlier, something that enables workers to do more. And to do their tasks better. So it goes back to this notion of putting the emphasis on the objective. So if the objective is to enhance human agency, we should not deploy AI in ways that curtail it, through surveillance, for instance, but actually in ways that augments what people can do.
So algorithms should only serve and not shape our decisions and choices moving forward. Now, this challenge is especially visible in places where access seems to be limited in regards to AI. In many regions, especially low and middle income countries, digital infrastructure remains inadequate. Director, what immediate interventions does the UNDP recommend to ensure that AI actually contributes to inclusion rather than exclusion?
Well, it starts with the infrastructure, as you mentioned. But I think there's something important about AI that's different from previous technologies as transformative as, for instance, as the internet or electricity. So closing these gaps in access to electricity, which many parts of the world actually still don't have, access to the internet, so closing these digital divides is very important. But the crucial point here is that AI does not require the same kind of physical infrastructure that is demanded of internet or electricity. And I'll just give you an example that illustrates the speed and the reach of AI. So when ChatGPT emerged in November 2022, over 90% of the traffic came from high-income countries, from these countries that already passed the digital divide many years ago. But a few months later, the majority of traffic was already coming from middle-income countries. So as long as people have access to the internet and have obviously access to electricity, they potentially already have access to AI. And so that even strengthens the case, I would say, for closing these digital gaps and closing these gaps in infrastructure, particularly what we call digital public infrastructure, infrastructure that is really inclusive and enables wide access to AI and other digital technologies.
So in order to boost AI accessibility, not a lot of technology is needed, right?
Not physical infrastructure in the same way that is needed for electricity, where you need to build a grid or in a decentralized way some kind of solar station. In the case of the internet, you need cables or some kind of satellite. But once you have these basics, in a sense, we already have AI potentially accessible. And I think that makes it very different from previous technologies with the potential of AI to transform our economies and our societies.
So building general digital foundations would be helpful in this front. Now, let's also turn to the cultural dimension of AI, Director. One of the report's striking visuals shows that ChatGPT answers reflect cultural patterns of very high HDI countries, like you've touched upon a while ago. How do we decolonize AI to ensure it reflects global diversity?
Well, first of all, AI is used or is trained based on examples and data that comes from our societies, from what we write, from what we share. And we have to recognize that our societies are biased. So it should not be a surprise that AI models themselves are biased because reflect that society. Now, if we take that further to the fact that societies have different cultural traits, if the majority of the models are made and trained based on data that comes from a particular part of the world, it's not surprising that they do not reflect the cultural diversity that exists around the world. So what we need to do is to make sure that we provide access to data, to the languages that enable models to be more representative of that cultural diversity that exists around the world, but that we do it in a way that is not extractive, but do it in a way that we find ways and mechanisms to enable the populations and the cultures that are contributing to enrich these AI models also somehow are rewarded from the fact that they are sharing these to make these models more culturally diverse.
And that also kind of returns to our previous discussion of, providing equitable digital foundations to many countries. Now, as for South Korea, it offers a very unique case in this point, having transformed itself into a tech-forward economy with strong public institutions. What kind of lessons do you think can be drawn from South Korea's example to inform global strategies on AI for sustainable development?
Well, I would suggest that we look at the transformation of Korea over a long period of time. And I mean, there are many lessons that can be drawn from Korea, but the one that I would recommend is to acknowledge that there are no shortcuts when it comes to development. So the process of Korea reaching where it is today was sometimes turbulent, volatile, but the key element, in my view, for the success of Korea was that it invested in human development. So it looked not only at technology, it looked not only at the economy, it looked also at health, education, and had that comprehensive perspective to guide the evolution of the country. So that focus on human development, I think, is what led Korea to be not only a rich economy, but a technology leader around the world. So that came as a result of the investments and emphasis on human development. And I think this is a very important lesson for countries around the world. Don't try to shortcut and try to get to the technology like Korea is able today. Take the steps, invest in people, invest in health, invest in education, in improving the performance of the economy, and ultimately technology will also get there.
So South Korea's trajectory from a recipient to a contributor could be a powerful case study in this regard. Now, on the global stage, Director, in what ways can Korea actually, through multilateral engagement, contribute to global standard setting around ethical AI? It's a hot topic these days, digital public infrastructure, and also inclusive governance.
Well, I think here we can take the framework that was agreed by United Nations member states of the Global Digital Compact. And there are three elements. There are many things in the Global Digital Compact, but I will emphasize three elements that provide ways in which Korea can contribute. So the first element of the Global Digital Compact that I think is important is to promote a dialogue across different countries on how to regulate AI, because different jurisdictions have very different views at the moment on the regulation of AI. So rather than imposing something that applies everywhere uniformly, I think it's important for countries to learn from one another, and I think Korea is a very important voice in contributing to this process, but also learning from others. The second element of the Global Digital Compact is that this comparison, this learning needs to be informed by science. And here again, I think Korea, being a leader, scientific, technological leader, has something important to contribute. And the third element has to do with creating the conditions so that all countries, including low-income countries, also have an ability to be part of this AI journey. And so again, I think Korea now, given that it's a rich country and has the resources, could also contribute to enable lower income countries to be part of this AI story, so that we don't have a world, as our Secretary General said, of AI haves and AI have-nots.
So continuous engagement and dialogue between many countries would be essential. Now let's bring the focus to the ground level, Director. Could you share with us some successful UNDP projects that demonstrate that AI is already contributing to education, health, or poverty reduction, particularly in the South?
Well, I think the first thing to emphasize is that we should not deploy AI for AI's sake. We should try to understand what are the kind of interventions, what are the kind of policies that we know are effective, and then see how we can leverage AI to enable us to do those interventions better or at a larger scale. So an example in education has to do with teaching to the right level. We know that one of the things that enable students to learn the most is by teaching at the right level. Now, this is very difficult to do in low resource settings, in low income countries, when you are limited in the number of teachers that we have. But AI can support a teacher in that role, enabling different students to learn at the right level. So this is an illustration of the kind of approach that we should be pursuing by trying to look at what kind of interventions do we know work, and then use AI to enable us to scale or to make them even better.
So making use of them in real life cases. Let's finally look ahead with urgency and hope as we navigate the era of climate shocks, conflict, and tech disruption. What is the single most important principle that should guide human development efforts in the AI era?
I think it's to put the focus on people and not the focus on technology. So I think we should ask less what kind of wonders does AI do, and much more in what ways is AI helping people do the things that are important to them. So I think this shift in focus is crucial. So we need to ask, as we were just discussing, how can AI help us to educate children better? How can AI help us to enhance health outcomes? How can AI help us to diversify economies? And the answers to these questions are not in the technology or in the capabilities of the technology, are rather in the ways in which we use and deploy the technology, and also in the way in which AI is going to evolve in the future. So shifting, or at least complementing, the focus on the capabilities of AI as such, as a technology, to include also the extent to which AI helps people to do what's important to them.
So making use of AI as a very important tool that could boost our decision and our judgments would be very important in this AI era moving forward. But I'm afraid we will have to conclude our discussion at this point. We had a very wonderful discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And for your insights tonight, Director Conceição. We appreciate it so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.